Alright, welcome to the first Fusion 360 tutorial. In this one, we'll just keep things simple. We're just going to look at the user interface so that we can navigate our way through Fusion 360. So you should see something like this when you first load up Fusion. Don't worry if you're feeling intimidated by this. It's going to make a lot of sense soon. One thing I want you to do is to first go to the data panel here, which is sort of like this 9-grid box. We're going to click on it, and this is our data panel. So what we have here is we have, first off, a way to keep track of our teams. So in this sense, we can create or join teams. This allows other Fusion 360 users to actually come in and edit designs that you allow them to edit, essentially. I wouldn't recommend it because I'm very protective of my designs, but you do you. Anyways, right here, we can also see we have a way to organize our designs. So if I click home here, you can see that I've got a whole bunch of folders with different parts. So I've got 3D printer parts, I've got personal projects, blah, blah, blah. If I ever want to find design, I can always click on a part. So let's just say personal projects, and I can find different designs that I want. Maybe I have them in folders. That's quite easy. All you do is just create new folder, title them, and when you save it, when you save your design, you can save them into these folders themselves. If you ever want to change parts, you can always move them around within the design panel. That's quite easy. You can always right click on the design, select move, and move them to whichever folder and whichever location you want in your browser, in your data panel. I won't take up too much time, so that's that. Next, I want to look at the application bar. So this is the application bar, this entire row here on the top. File is quite simple. It's just you can create new designs, you can upload, save, export. I mean, you're old enough, you should understand how this works. You can also save. I don't need to explain that. There's some tools. You have undo and redo, although I prefer to use the shortcut, which is Ctrl Z for undo and Ctrl Y for redo, right? Here we have our design tab itself. This is going to show you what you are working on currently. So if I hit this plus icon here, new design, you can see now I've got two tabs. If I ever want to cycle back to a previous design, I can always click on this tab and it'll bring me back to that one. And say I don't want this tab, I'll just hit the little X icon next to it, and that closes the design. Next, we have extensions. I'll just click on it, but if you're using the educational license, you may have some of these available. Generally speaking though, this is more for the professionals where you have to pay to use them. You can get, I think, a 30-day trial period, but it's not really going to be very useful for you as a beginner. So I don't recommend looking into it. Job status. Jobs are basically more relevant for when you're using cloud rendering, or maybe you're sending jobs like finite element analysis to the Fusion 360 cloud. This will just let you know what's being done when it's done so that you can go back and work on it some more. Again, as a beginner, you probably won't be using this unless you're rich enough to afford the credits. Next is the notification center. No one likes you, so you'll never get any notifications. Help is essentially just some Autodesk resources for troubleshooting certain things, maybe some tips here and there. You have me, you don't need this. Now this is important. This is you, right? So this is your user profile. If you click on this, you can see that there's an option to go to preferences. This is kind of like your settings, right? Global settings for Fusion. Now I'm going to click on that. You can see I have a few different settings that I can place. Now my settings will be a little bit different from yours because I have basically, set my own preferences. If you like, you can follow mine, or you can keep the default. They should not affect how you follow along with the tutorials. If you're ever confused, you can always look at the keystrokes here on the right. These will help to inform you on what actions I'm taking with my mouse and my keyboard. Anyways, for now, this is the settings I use. I'm just going to apply them if I'm changing anything. But for now, I'm not, so I'll just hit cancel. And that's the application bar. Next, we have the workspace, or what we call the toolbar. This entire place is called the toolbar. Now, this little box here that says design, if you click on it, you can see there are a few different types, right? Design is basically used for CAD modeling. Anytime you use any 2D or 3D sketching or 3D modeling, rather, you would use it in the design workspace. If you go down to render, this is where you would use your rendering tools, right? We go through this in a later tutorial, but for now, I would say just focus on design as a beginner. As you work through the different types, you start to understand the tools that you have available based on the task that you want to accomplish. For now, we'll leave it at design. Now you can see here that we have a few different icons, and these icons are what you would call commands. I tend to call them tools because I think of them more as tools, but technically called commands. Anyways, there's always a drop down box here because all these are just shortcuts, right? So if you go to create, you can see the full list of tools that you have available to you. In this case, create means you want to create a 3D object, but if say you have one, then you can always go to the modify tool here. And this modify tool will basically allow you to make changes to your 3D model, right? And now if you're wondering why maybe don't you have certain tools like say this change parameters tool here, you want to add it in. That's simple. Go down to the tool that you want. In this case, let's just say change parameters. There's a 3-dot icon on the right. If you click that, you can see there's an option to pin to toolbar. So if you check that, that will allow you to pin that to the toolbar. In this case, you can select what you want. It doesn't really matter. So let's just say we want to create a sketch, and you don't have to follow along. I'm just showing you as an example. You can see I can select create sketch. I'm going to select on this flat plane here, and I'll just draw a simple circle, right? You can see how easy it is to just click. I'm not even using my keyboard. I'm just clicking, and I can place sketches. I can make things, right? Now we have a sketch. Let's just say we extrude this up a little bit, and we've made a cylinder. See? So just by using the shortcuts here, you can make a 3D object quite easily. That's just an example. And the reason I did that was because I want to show you the next thing, which is exactly what you just seen, the canvas, right? So everything you see here, this white space and all the objects within it is called your canvas. Anytime you make any changes to your 3D model, they should be reflected here on this canvas. Now, there are many ways you can navigate within this canvas. There is the view cube here. We'll go more on that later. But let's just say you want to rotate this so that you're looking on top, from the top face. You can always click on the top face here. You can see how that there are different little highlighted spots. If I click on the top face, you can see that now I'm looking at it from the top, right? If I want a little bit more finer control, I can always click and drag this. And I'm clicking and dragging the view cube here. You can see how I'm rotating the object. Alternatively, something that I prefer to use, especially since it's a lot faster, is to hold shift, middle click on your mouse, and then you can rotate your object like so. See? In this case, my axis is there, but let's just say if I rotated it around, you can see how that moves. So this makes it a lot easier to move around your canvas and actually make changes to your object. Anyways, let's go on to probably the most important thing here, which is the browser. Now, your browser, think of it like your file explorer on your PC. Essentially, it keeps tracks of all your body, all your sketches, all your components. Anything that is within this box, it will keep track of. So in this case, we have a sketch that we drew before. You can see we can't see it now because we don't have it highlighted with the visibility icon. In this case, if I click on this here icon, the eye icon, you can see that my sketch is now being shown. And maybe I don't want my body in the way. That's simple. There's a little icon here, the little triangle. If I click that, you can see it drops down. And that's my body there. If I click on my body, it highlights the entire thing. I'm going to hide that body. And now you can see I'm back to my sketch. So maybe if, say, I wanted to make another extrusion down instead of up, like so. Now you see I've got two bodies. And if I bring back my first one, you can see I've got my longer cylinder and my shorter cylinder. If I hide the sketch, now I don't see it. So it's just a handy way to keep track of things. You can always click and drag certain parts. This is a bit more advanced. As we go into other tutorials, we'll show you how to do this. But for now, this browser is very important since it lists all your objects in your assembly, and it also helps to organize your data, right? So the sketches. So instance, let's just say this is my top. If I right click and I select rename, I can do top cylinder. And if I right click on the second one, rename, I can do bottom cylinder. So just that way I can always reference based on the names that I give them. So let's just say I want to select my top cylinder, I can always select it from here. And now if I want to select my bottom one, I can always select the bottom one instead. If I want to select both, I can always just hold shift, left click, and now I've selected both. This is just a good way to organize your data. Okay, so we've already gone through a bit about what the view cube does. Just to show you a few tricks, if you ever get lost, let's just say I've lost my cube, maybe I've zoomed out too far, zoomed in too much, I can always hover over my view cube, select the home icon here, and this will default to just this top edge here in the box. You can see that. So this helps you to find your objects if you ever get lost. One more thing is, if you ever need to look at certain objects from certain angles, let's just say I want to keep this view, but I just want to rotate it so that I can't see this top face. What I can do is I can always go to this edge here. You can see how it's highlighted. Click on it, and now it's showing me exactly that. Right. Now, if you don't see exactly what I see, the reason for that is because you are not in orthographic view. So the way we do that is we actually go to the navigation bar here, right? And it's called the navigation bar because you can always use these tools to change. You can use this to orbit your model. You can use the hand to pan. So let's just say pan, you see. Again, these can be done with shortcuts. It's a lot easier that way. If I wanted to pan, I could use the hand, but I prefer to use the middle mouse click, and this will drag it like so. See, I can drag it this way. So I'm holding the middle mouse click and dragging. But anyways, back to what I was saying. If you go down to display settings, right, and you go to camera, you can see I've got orthographic set. If you see this, right, this little bulge like so, right, that means it's not orthographic. Why? Because this is how a cylinder would appear in real life. You've got perspective. But when we work with 3D objects, we tend to not want this perspective to get in the way of our so we don't want to get in the way of how we make our measurements and edit our bodies. So in this case, orthographic is a very good way to do this. I highly recommend you select camera, orthographic, and stick with that for all your CAD modeling. Anyways, you can do other things here. You can also go into your visual style. So you can see how we have edges here. That's because these are two separate bodies. If I go into visual style and select shaded, now it's gone, because now the hard edges are no longer highlighted. And this can be quite useful if you want to sort of look at how your parts might gel together in real life. Generally speaking though, I don't like to use this. A cool one though is wireframe. So wireframe, you can see it shows it a little bit like those old-timey engineering CAD models, right? So if you want to make those kind of designs, you can always just draw this out, take a screenshot, put it into a software, editing software of your choice, and you can play around with that. That's quite useful. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, play around with it. Essentially, hidden edges just means that there are edges that you can't see, right? So in this case, right now, I technically shouldn't be able to see the rear edge of these two circles. But if I have hidden edges on, I can see them. Now, if I select with visible edges only, then you see they're gone because I can no longer see them. And this is my preferred one. Whenever you do CAD modeling, I suggest you stick with shaded with visible edges. This is 9 out of 10 times the one you want to stick with. Anyways, that's mostly it. You can also select viewports and you have multiple views. As a beginner, I highly don't recommend it. Even as a professional, I still don't like it. But you do you. Anyways, next we have what we call the marking menu. So if you ever want to be even more efficient than using all these shortcuts here, rather than going up, clicking, you can right click anywhere on the canvas, not on the model. Well, you can, but in this case, let's just start with the canvas first. If we right click on the canvas, you can see we have a few little options. We can repeat the last action that we took. We can delete things, undo, blah, blah, blah. These are all just shortcuts. We can also have our navigation bar here in the bottom. But this is mostly just a it's a contextual means of editing your model. So in this sense, the canvas has views that we can select, and we can move the canvas to see our objects. So most of the tools here would be, movement related. Now, if we right click on this object instead, you can see here now this changes, right? It's contextual. So if we want to say shell this, we can always select shell, and this is just a faster way to do it than to just click it here. Again, I don't like this. I'm just showing it to you because, don't get confused with what it is. Generally speaking, if you can't find the tools that you want, let's just say I'm looking for shell, okay? And I can't find shell here. And let's just say I'm too stupid to even click this modify and go down here and select shell, right? Let's just say I don't want to do all that. very easy. Press S, right, for standards. S. And now this will give you a design shortcut window that you can then type what you want. So in this case, let's go for shell. And you can see here now I can find the tools I want. Let's say I don't want shell, I want extrude. I'll type extrude. Now I have extrude. Now if I want your mom's number, I don't have that, but that's because it's not available in Fusion 360. You get what I'm saying? Anything you want here, if it has it, it will give it to you. So if you ever get lost, S is your best friend. Okay, remember that. S. If anything else, remember S. Anyways, last thing that we're going to talk about is the timeline here. Now the timeline is basically your best friend. Why is that? Because, think of it this way. If say I don't want this bottom cylinder anymore, right? What am I going to do? Am I going to go down, hit extrude, and remove this, maybe like in another CAD software, hey, I'm back to it. No, I've still got my bottom cylinder. It's a hassle, right? I don't want that. I'm going to hit Ctrl Z. Right now, if I use my timeline, I can say, hey, I want to go back to the good old times, the good old times before I had this horrible bottom cylinder. So all I have to do is to select this part here. This is your current space in time, essentially. This is you right now. And if I click it and I drag it back, you can see that I can go back in time. And now just by doing that, I've basically told Fusion, don't show me the extrude tool here that I used to make that bottom cylinder, right? And now if I want to make any more changes, let's just say I want to make another top cylinder because I'm always up. I always want to be on top of things. Now if I increase this up, let's just say we do a new body. Now I've got two cylinders like so. You see it appears here in our timeline as an additional one. And if I then go back and drag it out, you can see I've got a cylinder on the top and a cylinder on the bottom. But the one on top was created before the one on the bottom, even though I made this one first. And it's also useful because if I ever go, hey, I don't want this cylinder, the first one that I made, right? Let's see what happens if I delete this. Now it's going to warn me and I'll show you why. So I've got this deleted, but hang on. Why is this now yellow? Well, if I double click on it, you can see, hey, I'm missing profiles. And what that means basically is, if you remember we had our sketch and we extruded it from this sketch, when I made that extrusion, this one here on the top, this one, I didn't select this sketch, I selected the face of the previous cylinder we used. But now that cylinder's gone. So Fusion's gonna kind of freak out a little bit, but it's smart enough to say, okay, you messed up, you're probably stupid, but I think this is what you want. But that's why I'm saying it's yellow here. It's saying, hey, don't worry, I got you, fam. You stupid, but I got you. Now what happens if we undo this, and I say, let's delete this sketch here instead. Now it's giving me two warnings. It's saying, hey, the font that you made previously and this one, because these are both based on the sketches, are basically going to have some missing profiles and you may want to fix that. Again, there are many ways you can break this, so be careful. As a beginner, just try to take note. Try not to play around with the timeline too much. Try not to go back into the future or whatever and say, hey, I'm going to do this and, become my own grandfather. But if you ever get lost and you want to say, hey, I don't like this, I want to go back and make a few changes, you can always use the timeline. You'll see how you can use this in future tutorials if I ever get, if I can be bothered with it. But, this is quite an important tool in Fusion 360. If I'm not wrong, SolidWorks does not have this, so instantly this is already a better tool to use. Okay, and with that, we've completed our tour of the user interface. Okay, and with that, we've completed the tour of the user interface. If you're not very sure, remember you can always look online and you can find plenty of resources that will tell you exactly where you should go and what you should do. Because Fusion 360 has been around for quite a long time and a lot of beginners who probably have had the same issues as you have asked questions and they've been answered. So don't be scared, don't be intimidated. This is already a very simple user interface for you to navigate. And with that, we are done with the first activity for this tutorial. We'll move on to the second activity, in which I will actually make a Lego brick using the 3D modeling tools that we have here. Alright, see you there. remember as.